some reason, it seems like people like talking about the worst places in America, worst ghettos and worst hoods. Well, let me hip you guys with something. The worst street in Maryland might surprise you. It ain't Baltimore City, it ain't PG County, and it ain't DC. The worst street in Maryland used to be Orwell Court. Orwell Court was real bad. Orwell Court is in a community called Pioneer City. And back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, Pioneer City was one of the worst places in Maryland. The first person killed over a pair of Air Jordans happened in Severn, Maryland. This guy was from Pioneer City. He killed his best friend on the way from coming from high school, Meade High School. He was 17 at the time, and I think the other guy was 15. What's happening? This excerpt is from a video I made called Maryland's Worst Hood. But I wanted to look more into James David Martin's background. This was like the first guy to kill somebody over a pair of Air Jordans. And he grew up in Pioneer City. So let's look at his background. James David Martin was born December the 11th, 1971. He is an American serial killer who strangled 3 people across 3 states between 1989 and 2005. While serving a sentence for the murder of his wife in Pennsylvania, he was connected via DNA profiling to a cold case murder in the Bronx, for which he was later given an additional 20 years imprisonment. Now, James David Martin was born in the Bronx, New York in 1971. His nickname is Snake. Little is known about Martin's early life. According to the detectives who interviewed him, when he was about 6 years old, his mother beat his little sister to death. Following this event, James was sent to live in Fort Meade, Maryland, with his grandmother and sister and brother, where he attended Meade Senior High School. While a student there, he was on the basketball team, where he got acquainted with 15-year-old Michael Eugene Thomas, who would become his best friend and later become his first victim. Okay, guys, so as you can see, Pioneer City is 2.7 miles from Meade Senior High School. It's a very short drive, long walk. Take about an hour to walk it. But a lot of times, kids would walk home from school and cut through and you could cut through the paths and stuff from Meade Village to Pioneer City to get home, like kind of little shortcuts. Even though you have apartments and townhouses, it's heavily wooded. Like, see where it says Still Meadows? You can cut through the woods and get to the paths, and cut through the path to get to Pioneer City, where that circle is. It's like heavily woods around these apartment buildings and townhouses. At age 17, Martin was envious that his fellow basketball buddy Thomas had recently bought himself an expensive pair of Air Jordans worth $115. On May 2nd, 1989, James lured Michael into the woods near the school, where he proceeded to sodomize and then strangle him to death. Hey Google, what's the definition of sodomize?
Here's the definition of sodomize. Have anal intercourse with someone.
After killing him, he stole the Air Jordans and fled the scene. Not long after, however, he was arrested for the murder, charged with first-degree murder, and convicted. The senseless crime for the shoes, which ironically did not even fit Martin, were featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated, with professional basketball player Michael Jordan himself expressing his horror at the brutality of the crime. Anyway, he choked him out, took his tennis shoes, and then he couldn't even wear the tennis shoes. Just another senseless crime. That story made the cover of Sports Illustrated, and they say Michael Jordan was in shock over that incident. 15-year-old Michael Eugene Thomas was a ninth grader at Meade Senior High School in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. Thomas was found strangled on May 2, 1989. Charged with first-degree murder was James David Martin, 17, a basketball buddy who allegedly took Thomas's 2-week-old Air Jordan basketball shoes and left Thomas' barefoot body in the woods near school. The sad thing about this story is his grandmother, Bertie Thomas, told him you shouldn't wear them shoes to school, and he said, "Granny, before I let anyone take these shoes, they'll have to kill me." Martin served 7 years in prison before being released in 1996 and moving back to New York City to live with his mother. This right here is an actual newspaper article where they captured Martin, and it says, May 5th, tennis shoe murderer. This is in Alderton, Maryland, which ain't too far from Pioneer City, Fort Meade. So he only did 7 years for that murder. That's crazy. 1989, 1996. Here is the aftermath of what happened after this incident, including Michael Jordan. Sneaker murders changed Michael Jordan. In 1990, an explosive cover story fed the era's fear-mongering and demanded that the megastar account for it. Talking about Michael Jordan. For a moment, Rick Telander thought Michael Jordan looked like he might cry. In 1990, the senior writer from Sports Illustrated approached Jordan before practice and told him about the murder of a 15-year-old black boy named Michael Eugene Thomas. About a year earlier, the ninth grader from Anne Arundel, Maryland, had paid $115.50 for a pair of Air Jordans. The young fan worshipped the Chicago Bulls star and the shoes embroidered with his silhouette. Every night, he took his sneakers out of a black shoebox and polished them proudly. But about 2 weeks after he bought the Air Jordans, school children found him barefoot in the woods, strangled, face down in a puddle. Shortly thereafter, police charged his 17-year-old basketball buddy, James David Martin, with first-degree murder. Jordan sighed. He didn't know what to say. Sitting in a private room at the team's suburban practice facility in Deerfield, Illinois, he struggled to process incomprehensible and heinous crime. "I can't believe it," he said. Choked to death by his friend, Jordan asked Telander if he knew about similar crimes. Unfortunately, Telander explained, he had read numerous accounts like this one. In his jarring story, he wrote about the frightening outbreak of crimes among poor black kids, assaulting and sometimes killing one another for sneakers and starter jackets. After collecting stories from Chicago newspapers and Sports Illustrated, National News Bureau, Telander concluded that the crimes were not new, but the pace of the carnage quickened. In April of that year, New York Post columnist Phil Mushnick, a cynical crusader disillusioned with the greed and hypocrisy of sports, blamed Nike spokesman Jordan and Spike Lee for a wave of inner-city sneaker killings, claiming that the crimes had morphed into an epidemic. Shortly thereafter, Sports Illustrated published Telander's sensational cover story, Your Sneakers or Your Life, which created a simple narrative. Black kids killed other black kids for shoes worn by the great black basketball hero. Okay, let's get back to James Martin's life. On February 23rd, 1998, while walking around the Bronx, Martin came across 14-year-old Marlene Cruz, a Dominican-born adoptee who often went on visits to an aunt in the area. Taking an interest in the beautiful young girl, James asked her out on a date to his mother's apartment, to which she agreed. At some point, however, the pair began arguing, with Martin proceeding to grab her by the throat, beating, sexually abusing, and finally strangling Cruz to death. He then dumped her body on a curb in University Heights, where she was later found by passers-by. She was born in the Dominican Republic. She moved to New Jersey to be with her father after the tragic death of her mother. She was staying in the Bronx with a foster mother when she was murdered. In 2012, justice came to Marlene when the killer was identified through DNA. Initially, she could not be identified, and it was even presumed that she could have been Shantae Smalls, a girl who had recently gone missing, but it was later determined not to be the case, as Smalls was later found alive. 8 months later, through dental records, the body was identified as that of Cruz, but her killer remained elusive. Some detectives theorized that her death might have been related to a series of rapes that occurred in the Bronx at the time, but no conclusive connection was made to any such case. 5 months later, after Cruz's murder, Martin was arrested for groping a woman struggling with substance abuse and for possession of crack cocaine. He was jailed for a year and then released. Not long after, he lured a 17-year-old male relative on a rooftop in the Bronx, where he attempted to strangle the boy with the laces from his sweatpants. The relative lapsed into unconsciousness, with Martin stabbing him in the neck with a knife, stealing $30 and then fleeing. Miraculously, the boy survived his injuries and managed to reach a hospital. When he was visited by his family, he pleaded with them not to let James in, as he was sure he would finish him off. At that moment, James walked in, and although he was arrested on the spot, he was allowed to plead guilty to attempted robbery and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. Man, this guy was terrible. While in prison, he communicated with 30-year-old Cicely Santiago, who would become his girlfriend and later his wife. After his release, the couple moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania, where 3 months later, he strangled Cecilia to death after she threatened to leave him. Martin dumped her body in a parking lot trash bin near the mall, where she was soon found. Arrest, trial, and imprisonment. Martin was swiftly arrested following the discovery of his wife's body, pleading guilty and receiving a sentence of 22 to 44 years imprisonment, which he would serve at the State Correctional Institution, Somerset Prison. While serving his sentence there, his DNA was matched to that of an unidentified male found underneath the fingernails of Marlene Cruz, and detectives from the Bronx were dispatched to question him. He freely admitted his guilt in the murder and extradited back to New York City to stand trial on charges of murder, rape, and sodomy. On October 28, 2016, James David Martin pleaded guilty to her murder and received an additional 20 years imprisonment to be served on top of his previous sentence. Well, I hope you enjoy your new home, because you won't be getting out no time soon. I got a few things to say, guys. One, I did try to look up the people that he murdered, like Michael Eugene Thomas, the guy he killed for the Air Jordans. Michael Eugene Thomas. You know, it makes me sick how the killer, the bad guy, gets all the press, and I can't find one picture of the victim, Michael Eugene Thomas. I tried to find his picture and his wife. And his wife, it looks like Cecilia Santiago. It's sad that they got this asshole, the murderer, the killer, the monster. They got his picture up, but I can't find the people that he murdered. Then the one girl, they did have her picture. Maybe the family don't want it up. But anyway, guys. Oh yeah, one more thing. The guy that killed the CEO healthcare worker, he went to Allentown, same place this asshole went to. What is going on? Allentown, Pennsylvania. And the guy that tried to assassinate President Trump was from Pennsylvania, but he was near Pittsburgh. Peace out.